When ChatGPT was first released, most of the buzz was around how students could potentially use it to cheat. But as it turns out, teachers are using AI a whole lot more than students. And that's because of its enormous potential to be used as a huge time saver. Whether it's writing a unit plan or creating detailed instructions for an assignment, ChatGPT can do in seconds what would take most of us hours to complete. So if you haven't had the chance to get into ChatGPT to see what it's all about, I'll show you everything you need to know to get started in this video. All right, to get started, you just need to hop over to chat.openai.com, and there you can sign up for a free account. So you'll click here to sign up. It will ask you for your email. You'll have to answer a few security questions, and then you'll have free access to ChatGPT. Now, when you sign in to the free version of ChatGPT, you essentially have access to a less powerful, older version of ChatGPT. That's GPT 3.5. If you want to upgrade to access this newer version, GPT-4, you will have to pay $20 a month. So you can go over here to upgrade to Plus. You'll see that really the main feature is that you'll have access to GPT-4, and you also have some other perks like faster response speeds, and you have the ability to use different plugins, which are essentially like Google Chrome extensions that you can add to ChatGPT for additional functionality. But that will have to be the topic of another video. If you're weighing whether or not to pay for ChatGPT, I do think it's worth checking out the Pro version for at least a month. And that's because GPT-4 is just so much more powerful than GPT 3.5. GPT-4 was trained on a much larger data set. It was trained by humans for a longer period of time, and that results in responses that are significantly more detailed, more nuanced, more accurate, and more creative. That being said, GPT 3.5 is still quite impressive, and if you're brand new to AI, it's still going to blow your mind, and you can access it without paying anything. All right, now let's jump into ChatGPT. So down here at the bottom where it says send a message is where you can enter your prompts. Now there's a lot of information out there about prompt engineering and how to interact with ChatGPT, but if I can give you one piece of advice about prompt engineering, it is that you should be as specific as possible. So this is the time to use descriptive language to really spell out exactly what you're looking for. The more specific you can be, the better the response is going to be from ChatGPT. To illustrate this point, let's look at a quick example. So as a teacher, you might ask ChatGPT to create a lesson plan for you. You might enter a prompt like this: create a 10th grade biology lesson about cell structure. So let's see what it produces when I hit enter. All right, so you can see here that it did generate a relatively detailed lesson plan. We have an objective, an introduction, and then explanation sections for different types of cells. And here we have different breakdowns of key vocabulary. Then there's a suggested activity, even an interactive 3D model exploration activity, discussion with Q&A, a homework assignment, assessment, which is a short quiz, a conclusion, and then it tells you some materials that you would need. So this is not bad, but it is essentially a pretty generic lesson, particularly when we look at the assessment, which is a short quiz. So if you know you want to incorporate more project-based learning, or you want to use more technology in the lesson, then you definitely want to spell that out in your prompt. So let's look at a more specific version of that same prompt to see the difference that it makes. Now, this time, note that I specified that I wanted ChatGPT to take on the role of an award-winning 10th grade biology teacher who specializes in project-based learning. And then I told ChatGPT that its task was to create a highly engaging, hands-on, technology-enriched lesson plan on cell structure that aligns with the NGSS standards. So I really specifically tried to stuff as many keywords, jargon type words that I knew into this prompt so that it would give me a response that was closer to what I wanted to actually teach for my lesson. So let's see what happens here when we hit enter. So you can see that by simply adding some keywords, some jargon words, descriptive adjectives, I was able to get a much more robust response out of ChatGPT. If you just saw this first response, you might think, yeah, it's okay, but probably not something I'm actually going to use. Whereas this response is something that I might actually use for a lesson. So first of all, it does align this lesson with the NGSS standards. It gives me clear objectives, materials that I would need, breaks it down into 3 distinct days, and then suggests a pretty cool project here, a cell city project, and then later is even going to suggest some specific technology tools down here that we could use to share the project and also to just formatively assess students. Now, once we have something solid like this, we can start to build upon it by asking it to do things like generate rubrics and generate instructions for how to actually do this project. And this will serve as a really strong foundation now for building out all of our lesson materials about this particular plan. Now, just a few other things I want to show you to make sure that you know how this whole interface works. One is that you can ask ChatGPT to regenerate its response by clicking regenerate here. So because ChatGPT is a generative AI model that has some randomization built into it, it's always going to produce something different every time you prompt it. So actually right here, we can see that we're going to be exploring cell structure through virtual reality in this lesson. So if you aren't 100% satisfied with the initial prompt or the initial response, it is a good idea to ask it to generate a new response just to see what it will come up with. Now I'm going to click stop generating here just for the sake of not having it go through the whole thing. Know that you can do that if you find that it's not really giving you the response that you want. And I want to also show you here how just because you asked it to regenerate the response doesn't mean that you lost the original response. So you can see up here that I can still access that first lesson, and now I can also access this second lesson. And then there's this other really cool feature here where you can copy the response. So this just copied it to a clipboard, and now I can paste it wherever I want. So if I want to share these 2 lesson ideas with, say, my partner teacher, I can easily do that. Now, these thumbs up and thumbs down options here are not super important. If you want to give feedback to OpenAI to help them improve ChatGPT's responses, you can give it a thumbs up if you liked it and then give it more detailed feedback. If it was a really poor response in your opinion, you could give it a thumbs down, and that will indicate that that response did not meet your expectations. Notice over here on the left-hand side that we have a whole history of our chat conversations. This is really useful for productivity because essentially what you can do is set up a single conversation to be about a particular topic, and then you can continue to ask questions within that specific topic. So now that this one is set up for this lesson, I'll continue to ask questions based on this lesson, but I wouldn't want to start asking questions about something totally new. Instead, I would want to start a new chat, and let's say I wanted to ask it for help now with composing emails. I'm going to keep that totally separate. So you can see here that what I've done is name my chat conversations based on the topic of that particular thread. So if we go to YouTube Assistant here, it's going to be a thread, you can see quite long one here, that is all about YouTube videos. So I started with a prompt that is about YouTube. I'm not going to ask other questions within this particular thread. And then what I did is I clicked this pencil icon and I renamed this. So in my experience, it doesn't ever name the conversation what I want it to be named. So here I'll name it YouTube Assistant, and you can see that I've done that for lots of them. So I have middle school digital media for the curriculum that I'm building in my digital media class. And you can see very real ways that I'm using it here. So I'm currently working on building a project for a room that students are designing, and it's giving me some step-by-step instructions about how to do that. But let's say that I have some other questions, like I want it to help me with creating my website. I have that in a totally different chat conversation, and I can go back to it, access it, and continue to ask questions in this particular topic. So that's really helpful. It's a way that you can essentially not have to repeat yourself over and over. You should know that every time you interact with ChatGPT, you are training ChatGPT. You are giving it data, you're giving it information. So it's best to not ever use real names. Definitely don't enter student names when you are using ChatGPT. And if you're concerned at all about privacy, you can make it so that it actually does not store your information. So if you want to do that, go down to your name on the bottom left-hand side, click Settings, then go to Data Controls. And if you turn off chat history and training here, then you'll see that it's no longer going to show you your history. Essentially, it's not saving that information anymore. You can always go back and enable it again, and then it will bring those back. How that's working exactly, where it's still saving it, I'm not quite sure, but it does say that it's not using your data if you decide to turn that off. So maybe something you want to take into consideration. I do find this feature, the ability to essentially set up different chats based on different topics, to be so helpful that I choose to give it my data. I was only able to cover some very basic elements of ChatGPT in this video, and if you're interested in jumping in and learning a little bit more, then I'd recommend checking out our free ChatGPT 101 course. I'll put the link for that course in the video description, and I hope to see you over there.